The summer heat was brutal that Tuesday afternoon. The kind of heat that makes your shirt stick to your back within minutes of stepping outside. Inside the garage of Premier Auto Services, the air conditioning struggled to keep up with the temperature, and the smell of motor oil and tire rubber hung thick in the air. Daniel wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a small streak of grease across his skin. He'd been working at this shop for 8 years now, and he knew every corner of this place like the back of his hand. The creaky third bay door that needed an extra push to close properly, the toolbox in the corner that had the best socket wrench set, the coffee maker in the break room that only worked if you hit it twice on the left side. 8 years. That was a long time to spend anywhere, and Daniel had given this place everything he had. He'd built a reputation as the guy who could fix anything. Customers would specifically ask for him by name. "Is Daniel working today?" They'd ask at the front desk. "I trust him with my car." That kind of trust didn't come easy in this business. You had to earn it, one oil change and one transmission repair at a time. The morning had been busy as usual. A businessman's BMW with a strange rattling sound that turned out to be a loose heat shield, a college student's Honda that needed new brake pads, a young mother's minivan with a check engine light that was just a faulty oxygen sensor. Daniel handled each job with the same attention to detail, explaining everything to the customers in simple terms they could understand. He never tried to upsell them on services they didn't need. His boss didn't like that about him, but the customers loved it. Gerald Hutchins, the owner of Premier Auto Services, was a different breed entirely. He'd inherited the shop from his father 10 years ago, and had been running it like a business first and a service second ever since. Everything was about profit margins and quarterly earnings. He'd eye every customer who walked through the door, calculating in his head how much money he could squeeze out of them. If you drove a luxury car, Gerald would practically roll out a red carpet. If you showed up in an older vehicle, he'd barely look your way. Daniel had learned to keep his head down and do his work.
He needed this job.
His wife, Lisa, worked part-time at the local library, and their son, Tommy, was starting college in the fall. The tuition bills were already piling up on their kitchen table at home. They weren't struggling exactly, but they weren't comfortable either. Every paycheck mattered. Every dollar counted. Around 1:30 in the afternoon, Daniel was just finishing up a tire rotation on a Lexus SUV when he heard the sound. It was a distinctive noise, the kind that makes any mechanic's ears perk up. A motorcycle engine sputtering and coughing, clearly not running right. He rolled out from under the vehicle and stood up, stretching his back. Through the open bay door, he could see an old woman riding what looked like a vintage motorcycle from the 70s. The bike was struggling, jerking forward in fits and starts. The woman looked to be in her mid-70s, maybe older. She wore simple clothes, a faded blue blouse and worn jeans, and her silver hair was pulled back in a practical bun. Her face was etched with worry lines, and even from a distance, Daniel could see she was distressed. The motorcycle finally gave up completely about 20 feet from the garage entrance, coughing out one last protest before going silent. The woman climbed off slowly, moving with the careful deliberation of someone whose joints don't work quite like they used to. She began pushing the heavy bike toward the entrance, struggling with its weight. Daniel started to move forward to help, but Gerald's voice cut through the garage like a knife. "We don't service motorcycles here." Gerald had appeared from his office, probably attracted by the sound. He stood in the entrance, arms crossed, already shaking his head before the woman had even reached him. The old woman looked up, her face flushed from exertion and heat. "Please, I just need help. The bike keeps dying and I need to get to County General Hospital. My daughter, she's in surgery and they said..." Her voice cracked slightly. "They said it's serious. I need to be there." Gerald didn't budge. "Lady, we service cars. Luxury vehicles. This is a professional establishment, not some roadside repair shack." He gestured dismissively at the motorcycle. "That thing looks like it belongs in a museum. We don't have time for this." "I can pay," the woman said quickly, reaching into a small purse that hung from her shoulder. Her hand shook slightly as she pulled out a worn wallet. "I have money. Not a lot, but I can pay something." Daniel watched from his position by the Lexus. Something about the scene made his chest tight. The desperation in the woman's voice. The casual cruelty in Gerald's dismissal. He'd seen his boss turn away customers before, but this felt different. This woman wasn't looking for convenience. She was looking for help getting to her daughter. "How much is something?" Gerald asked, his tone making it clear he was already uninterested in the answer. The woman opened her wallet with trembling fingers and pulled out a few bills. I have $47 here, and I could get more next week when my check comes. I just need the bike running long enough to get to the hospital. It's only about 15 miles from here. Gerald actually laughed at that. It wasn't a friendly laugh. $47? Lady, we charge $75 just for a diagnostic. You're wasting my time and your time. There's a bus stop 2 blocks down. I suggest you use it. But my daughter, not my problem. Gerald turned away, already heading back toward his office. Daniel, get that Lexus finished up. The owner's coming back in 20 minutes and she's one of our platinum members. Daniel stood there, his wrench still in his hand, frozen between obedience and conscience. The old woman stood in the entrance, her shoulders sagging. She looked down at the money in her hand, then at her silent motorcycle, then toward the direction of the hospital. Her eyes were beginning to glisten with tears that she was clearly trying to hold back. She started to push the motorcycle back away from the garage, moving slowly, defeated. The bike was heavy and she had to put all her weight into it just to get it moving. Daniel watched her struggling and something inside him just snapped into place. He glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 1:45. His lunch break had technically started 15 minutes ago. He set down his wrench, wiped his hands on his coveralls, and walked toward the entrance. "Ma'am, wait a second," he called out. The woman stopped and turned, hope flickering in her tired eyes. Daniel looked back over his shoulder. Gerald had disappeared into his office, probably already on the phone with another high-paying customer. The other mechanics in the shop were busy with their own jobs, not paying attention. He made a decision. "It's my lunch break," Daniel said, more to himself than to her. "Let me take a quick look." "Oh, thank you," the woman breathed out. "Thank you so much." "No promises," Daniel said quickly, already walking toward his personal toolbox in the corner. "But let me see what's going on." He wheeled the motorcycle into an empty bay, the one furthest from Gerald's office window. The woman followed, hovering nearby, her hands clasped together anxiously. Up close, Daniel could see how old the bike really was. A 1972 Triumph, unless he was mistaken. Beautiful machine in its day, but clearly showing its age now. "What's it been doing?" Daniel asked, already examining the fuel line. "It starts fine when it's cold," the woman explained. "But then after I ride for a few minutes, it starts coughing and jerking. Then it just dies. I let it sit for a while and it starts again, but the same thing happens." Daniel nodded. Classic symptoms. He checked the fuel filter first, dirty but not completely clogged. Then he moved to the carburetor. The moment he touched it, he felt the problem. The mounting bolts were loose, letting air leak into the system. That would cause exactly the kind of behavior she was describing. "When's the last time this was serviced?" he asked, already reaching for a wrench. "My late husband used to take care of it," the woman said softly. "He passed 2 years ago. I've been trying to maintain it myself, but I don't really know what I'm doing. It was his baby. He restored it himself back in 1985. Daniel worked quickly, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. He tightened the carburetor mounting, then checked the fuel line connections. Everything was loose, probably from years of vibration and age. He cleaned the spark plugs while he was at it. They were fouled with carbon buildup. Then he adjusted the idle mixture, listening to the engine sound in his head even before starting it. The woman watched him work, silent except for an occasional sigh of worry. Daniel could feel the tension radiating from her. He glanced at her face and saw she was staring off into the middle distance, clearly thinking about her daughter in surgery somewhere across town. "How long has your daughter been in the hospital?" Daniel asked, partly to make conversation, partly because he genuinely wanted to know. "She went in this morning," the woman said. "Emergency surgery. Her appendix ruptured. The doctor said she should be okay, but there were complications. She's been in the operating room for 3 hours now." Her voice wavered. "I'm all she has. Her father, my husband, he's gone. She never married, no kids. It's just the 2 of us. I need to be there when she wakes up. I promised her I would be." Daniel's hands paused for just a moment. He thought about Tommy, his own son. He thought about what it would feel like to be in surgery, scared and alone, wondering if your family would make it in time. He thought about Lisa, and how he'd move heaven and earth to get to her if she needed him. He worked faster. 20 minutes after he'd started, Daniel stepped back from the motorcycle. "Try starting it now." The woman climbed on, her movements more hopeful now. She turned the key and the engine caught immediately, settling into a smooth, steady purr. Her face lit up with relief and joy. "Oh my goodness," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Oh, thank you. Thank you so much." "Take it easy on the throttle for the first few minutes," Daniel instructed. "Let it warm up properly. And when you get a chance, take it to a proper motorcycle mechanic for a full service. There's a good shop on Maple Street, Bruno's Bike Repair. Tell Bruno that Daniel from Premier sent you. He'll take care of you." The woman climbed off the bike and reached for her purse again. "Please let me pay you. I know $47 isn't much, but keep your money," Daniel said, waving her off.
Get yourself some lunch on the way to the hospital.
"You look like you haven't eaten today. I can't just—" "Yes, you can." Daniel smiled at her. "Go be with your daughter. That's payment enough." The woman's eyes filled with tears then, real tears that rolled down her weathered cheeks. She stepped forward and took both of Daniel's greasy hands in hers, squeezing them tightly. "You're a good man. A truly good man. God bless you. Just pay it forward someday," Daniel said, feeling awkward with the praise. "When you see someone who needs help, help them if you can." The woman nodded vigorously, climbed back on the motorcycle and rode off slowly toward the street. Daniel watched her go, the Triumph's engine running smoothly now, carrying her toward her daughter. He felt good about it. Tired, sure. His lunch break was basically gone now. But good. He turned back toward the garage, already thinking about finishing up that Lexus. That's when he saw Gerald standing in the doorway of his office, arms crossed, face red with anger. Their eyes met across the garage floor, and Daniel's good feeling evaporated instantly. He knew right then that he'd just made a terrible mistake. Gerald didn't say anything at first. He just stood there in the doorway of his office, staring at Daniel with an expression that was somehow worse than anger. It was cold calculation mixed with rage, the look of a man who'd just been defied and was deciding exactly how to respond. Daniel felt his stomach drop. He'd known this was coming the moment he'd decided to help that woman. But knowing something and experiencing it are two very different things. He walked slowly back into the garage, wiping his hands on a shop rag, trying to appear calm even though his heart was hammering in his chest. "Daniel." Gerald's voice cut through the ambient noise of the garage like a blade. "My office now." The other mechanics in the shop suddenly found their work very interesting. Mike, who'd been working at the station next to Daniel's, suddenly became fascinated with a tire pressure gauge. Tony, the newest guy, practically crawled under the Honda he was working on. Nobody wanted to be involved in what was about to happen. Daniel followed Gerald into the small office at the back of the garage. The room was exactly what you'd expect from a man like Gerald. Fake wood paneling, a desk covered in invoices and repair orders, a filing cabinet that hadn't been organized in years, and a window that looked out over the garage floor. Gerald positioned himself behind his desk like a king on a throne, but he didn't sit down. Neither did Daniel. "What the hell was that?" Gerald said, his voice low and dangerous. "I helped a customer," Daniel replied, keeping his tone even. "On my lunch break. I told her we don't service motorcycles. I told her to leave. And you directly contradicted me in front of a potential customer." Gerald's face was getting redder by the second. She needed help getting to the hospital. Her daughter's in surgery. "I don't care if her daughter's on Mars." Gerald slammed his hand on the desk, making a coffee mug jump. "I run this business, not you. When I say no to a customer, that's the end of it. You don't get to overrule my decisions." Daniel took a breath, trying to stay calm. "It was my lunch break, Gerald, my time. I used my own tools from my personal toolbox. I didn't charge her anything, so the shop didn't lose any money." "That's not the point." Gerald was almost shouting now. "The point is respect. The point is following orders. The point is that I'm the boss here, and what I say goes. You think you can just do whatever you want because customers like you?" There it was. The real issue. Gerald had always been jealous of Daniel's relationship with the customers. People trusted Daniel. They asked for him by name. They left positive reviews mentioning him specifically. Gerald owned the shop, but Daniel was the face of it, and Gerald hated that. "I was just trying to help someone in need," Daniel said quietly. "Help someone in need," Gerald repeated mockingly. "This is a business, not a charity. We're here to make money, not feel good about ourselves. You want to be a hero? Join the fire department." She just needed 15 minutes of work. 15 minutes that you could have spent finishing the Lexus. 15 minutes that belonged to me because you're on my clock. Gerald leaned forward, his knuckles white against the desk. You know what your problem is, Daniel? You're soft. You let people walk all over you. That old lady probably had the money for a proper repair, but she saw a sucker and played you. Oh, my daughter's in the hospital. Oh, I only have $47. Classic sob story. Daniel felt anger rising in his chest, hot and righteous. You don't know that. You didn't even talk to her. I didn't need to. I've been in this business for 10 years. I know the game. Gerald straightened up, crossing his arms. But here's what I know for sure. I can't trust you. If you'll ignore a direct order for some random person off the street, what else will you do? Will you give unauthorized discounts? Will you let customers slide on payments? Will you undermine me every time you disagree with a decision? That's not fair, Gerald. I've worked here for 8 years. 8 years without a single complaint. I've brought this shop more repeat customers than anyone else on your staff. Yeah, by being a pushover. By being everyone's friend instead of being a professional. Gerald walked around the desk now, getting closer. You want to know what professionalism is? It's doing what your boss tells you to do. It's understanding that business decisions aren't personal. It's knowing that sometimes you have to say no even when it feels bad. Even when it's the wrong thing to do. There's no right and wrong in business, Daniel. There's profit and loss. There's smart and stupid. And what you did today was stupid. They stood there facing each other, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Through the window, Daniel could see the other mechanics pretending not to watch. Mike glanced their way, then quickly looked away. The whole shop knew what was happening. I'm not going to apologize for helping someone, Daniel said finally. If that makes me a bad employee in your eyes, then I guess that's how it is. Gerald smiled then, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who'd just won an argument. You know what? You're right. That's exactly how it is. He walked back to his desk and opened a drawer, pulling out a manila folder. Daniel recognized it, his personnel file. Gerald made a show of opening it, scanning the pages, even though Daniel knew he wasn't really reading anything. 8 years, Gerald said, almost to himself. I've put up with your Boy Scout routine for 8 years. The customers love you, so I tolerated it. But today you crossed a line. Today you showed me that you don't respect my authority, and I can't have that in my shop. Daniel's mouth went dry. What are you saying? I'm saying you're fired. The words hung in the air like smoke. Daniel felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. You're firing me for helping someone? I'm firing you for insubordination, for ignoring a direct order, for wasting company time and resources without authorization. It was my lunch break. You used the garage bay. You used the shop lighting. You used compressed air from our compressor. Those are company resources. Gerald was clearly enjoying this now. And even if it was your lunch break, which is debatable, you still acted against my explicit instructions. That's grounds for termination. Daniel felt panic rising in his chest. He thought about the bills at home. The mortgage payment due in 2 weeks, Tommy's tuition for fall semester, Lisa's paycheck from the library that barely covered groceries. They had maybe $3,000 in savings. How long would that last? Gerald, come on. Let's talk about this. I made a mistake. I should have asked you first. Too late for that. Gerald closed the personnel file with a snap. I need employees I can trust. Employees who understand the chain of command. You're not that person. I have a family. A son starting college. I need this job. You should have thought about that before you decided to play hero. Gerald moved toward the door, opening it wide. Clean out your locker. Turn in your uniform shirt. I want you out of here in 15 minutes. Daniel couldn't believe this was happening. 8 years. 8 years of loyalty, of showing up every day, of going above and beyond. And it was ending like this, over 15 minutes of kindness. This is wrong and you know it, Daniel said, his voice shaking slightly. What's wrong is an employee thinking he runs the place. Gerald raised his voice now, loud enough for everyone in the garage to hear. What's wrong is someone putting their feelings ahead of business. What's wrong is thinking the rules don't apply to you. Daniel walked out of the office, his legs feeling like lead. Every eye in the garage was on him now. The other mechanics had stopped pretending to work. Even a customer who'd been waiting in the lobby area was watching through the window. That's right, everyone listen up, Gerald announced, following Daniel out into the garage. This is what happens when you think you know better than management. This is what happens when you can't follow simple instructions. Mike stepped forward, his face troubled. Boss, come on. Daniel's the best mechanic we have. Maybe you guys can work this out. Stay out of this, Mike, unless you want to join him. Mike backed off immediately, his expression apologetic. Daniel didn't blame him. Mike had 3 kids and a wife who didn't work. He couldn't risk his job, no matter how unfair this was. Daniel walked to his locker in the break room, his mind numb. He opened it mechanically, pulling out the extra work boots he kept there, a sweatshirt, some protein bars he'd stashed for busy days. His hands were shaking as he stripped off his uniform shirt with the Premier Auto Services logo on the breast. He stood there in his white undershirt, feeling exposed and humiliated. Tony, the new guy, appeared in the doorway. He was maybe 22, fresh out of tech school. "Hey, man. This is messed up. Everyone knows Gerald's been looking for a reason to get rid of you because customers like you better than him." "Doesn't matter now," Daniel said, shoving his belongings into a plastic bag someone had left in the locker. "For what it's worth, you did the right thing. That lady needed help." Daniel managed a weak smile. "Thanks, kid. That means something." He grabbed his personal toolbox from his station, the one his father had given him when he'd first become a mechanic 20 years ago. It was heavy, filled with tools he'd collected over 2 decades. Good tools, expensive tools, tools that had served him well. He'd never imagined carrying them out of here like this. Gerald was waiting by the entrance, arms crossed, watching Daniel's every move like a prison guard. "Don't forget to turn in your key to the supply closet." Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out his key ring. He removed the supply closet key, the key to the front entrance, and the key to the garage bay doors. He handed them to Gerald without a word. "Anything else?" Gerald asked. "Yeah." Daniel looked his former boss in the eye. "You're going to regret this," Gerald laughed. "Is that a threat?" "No, just a fact. Good mechanics aren't easy to find. And good people are even harder to find. You just lost both. I'll take my chances." Gerald stepped aside, gesturing toward the door like a doorman. "Goodbye, Daniel. Good luck finding someone else who'll put up with your attitude." Daniel walked out into the afternoon heat, his toolbox weighing down his right arm, his bag of belongings in his left hand. His truck was parked in the lot behind the garage. He loaded everything into the bed, moving slowly, still processing what had just happened. Through the garage windows, he could see the other mechanics going back to work. Business as usual. The world kept turning even when yours had just fallen apart. He climbed into his truck and sat there for a moment, his hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. Then he pulled out his phone and called Lisa. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, honey. What's up? You usually don't call during work." Daniel took a breath. "Lisa, I need to tell you something. And I need you not to panic." There was a pause. "What happened?" "I got fired." Silence. "Then what? Why?" "What did you do?" "I helped someone. An old lady. Her daughter was in surgery, and she needed her motorcycle fixed to get to the hospital. Gerald told her to leave, but I fixed it anyway during my lunch break. He fired me for it." Another pause, longer this time. Daniel could hear Lisa breathing. Could imagine her processing this information, calculating in her head what it meant for their finances, for Tommy's college, for everything. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, come home. We'll figure this out together. I'm so sorry, Lisa. I know we can't afford this. I know Tommy's tuition is due. I couldn't let her struggle like that." "I know you couldn't." Lisa's voice was gentle now. "That's who you are, Daniel. That's the man I married. We'll figure something out. We always do." Daniel felt his eyes burning. He blinked hard. "I love you. I love you too. Now come home." He started the truck and pulled out of the parking lot, watching Premier Auto Services disappear in his rearview mirror. 8 years gone in 15 minutes, all because he'd chosen kindness over obedience. As he drove home through the afternoon traffic, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he'd made the right choice, even if it had cost him everything. That old woman had needed help. Her daughter had needed her. Sometimes doing the right thing came with a price. He just hoped he could find a way to pay it. Daniel barely slept that night. He'd lie there staring at the ceiling, then drift off for maybe 20 minutes only to wake up with his mind racing about job applications and bills and what the hell they were going to do. Lisa slept beside him, or at least pretended to sleep. He could tell by her breathing that she was awake too, probably doing the same mental calculations he was. They'd talked for hours after he got home. Sat at the kitchen table with their bank statements spread out, trying to make the numbers work. $3,000 in savings. Mortgage was $1,200 a month. Utilities, insurance, groceries, Tommy's tuition payment due in 6 weeks. However they sliced it, they had maybe 2 months before things got really bad, and that was if nothing unexpected happened, which in Daniel's experience, something unexpected always happened. Tommy had taken the news hard. Their son was 19, home for the summer before heading back for his sophomore year. He'd immediately offered to drop out, get a full-time job, help support the family. Daniel had shut that down fast. No way was his son giving up his education because of this. They'd figure something out. But as the night wore on and the ceiling fan spun lazy circles above him, Daniel couldn't see what that something was. He was 43 years old. He'd been a mechanic his entire adult life. It was all he knew. And in a town this size, there weren't that many shops hiring. He'd have to call around tomorrow, put out feelers, maybe even look at shops in neighboring towns. That would mean a longer commute, more gas money they didn't have. Around 5 in the morning, he gave up on sleep and went to make coffee. The kitchen was quiet. Just the sound of the coffee maker gurgling and the early birds starting to sing outside. He sat at the table in the dim pre-dawn light, his hands wrapped around the warm mug, trying to mentally prepare himself for the job search ahead. That's when he heard it, a car door closing. Then another. Then another. Daniel frowned and walked to the front window, pulling back the curtain. What he saw made his blood run cold. 7 black SUVs were parked in front of his house. Not just parked, arranged. They blocked his driveway completely and were positioned in a way that looked almost military. All of them had dark-tinted windows. All of them were expensive, probably $60,000 or $70,000 each. The kind of vehicles that screamed money and power. "Lisa," Daniel called out, his voice tight. "Lisa, get up. We have a situation." He heard her feet hit the floor upstairs, then rapid footsteps as she hurried down. What's wrong?" "Look outside." Lisa came to stand beside him at the window. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, Daniel, what did you do?" "Who are these people?" "I don't know." Daniel's mind was racing. Had he gotten involved in something yesterday without knowing it? Was that old woman connected to something dangerous? Had he unknowingly helped someone who was in trouble with the wrong people? "Stay here. Lock the door behind me. Are you crazy? You're not going out there." But Daniel was already moving. Whatever this was, he needed to face it. He couldn't just hide in his house while 7 SUVs sat outside. The neighbors were already starting to notice. He could see curtains moving in the Johnson's house across the street, and old Mr. Chen from next door had come out onto his porch in his bathrobe. Daniel opened the front door and stepped out onto his small porch. The morning air was already warm, promising another hot day. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. The doors of the center SUV opened first. 2 men in dark suits stepped out, the kind of suits that probably cost more than Daniel's entire wardrobe. They moved with a controlled precision that suggested either military or security training. One of them, a tall man with silver hair and an earpiece, approached the house. Daniel's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he stayed where he was. "Daniel Cooper?" the man asked. His voice was professional, neutral. "That's me." "Who's asking?" "My name is Robert. I'm head of security for the Ashworth family." He reached into his jacket pocket. Daniel tensed and pulled out a business card, holding it up so Daniel could see it. "I apologize for the dramatic arrival, but Mrs. Ashworth insisted on coming personally." "Mrs. Ashworth? I don't know any—" Daniel stopped mid-sentence as another door opened. The old woman from yesterday stepped out of the center SUV. Except she didn't look anything like the old woman from yesterday. Same face, same silver hair, but everything else was different. Yesterday she'd worn faded jeans and a simple blouse. Today she wore an elegant cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Daniel's truck. Yesterday she'd seemed tired and worried. Today she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone used to being in charge. Yesterday she'd been riding a beat-up vintage motorcycle. Today she'd arrived in a convoy that looked like it belonged to a president. Daniel felt like he'd been hit in the chest with a hammer. What the hell was happening? The woman, Mrs. Ashworth apparently, walked toward the house with Robert at her side. 2 other security personnel flanked them at a discreet distance. She was smiling, a warm, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "Mr. Cooper," she said as she approached, "I apologize for alarming you. I asked Robert to make the arrival less dramatic, but he insisted on protocol." What?
"Who are you?"
Daniel stammered. May we come inside? I promise you have nothing to fear. I just wanted to thank you properly for what you did yesterday. Lisa appeared in the doorway behind Daniel, having apparently decided that hiding inside was less important than knowing what was happening. She looked at the SUVs, then at the elegant woman, then at Daniel with an expression that clearly said, "What the hell is going on?" "This is the woman I helped yesterday," Daniel explained. "With the motorcycle? Mrs. Ashworth, apparently." "Eleanor Ashworth," the woman said, extending her hand to Lisa. "You must be Daniel's wife. I'm so pleased to meet you." Lisa shook her hand automatically, still looking confused. "I'm Lisa. Do you want to come in?" "That would be lovely, thank you." The next few minutes felt surreal. Daniel and Lisa led Eleanor Ashworth and her head of security into their modest living room. The furniture was old but comfortable, nothing fancy. Family photos on the walls, Tommy's high school graduation picture on the mantel, a stack of library books on the coffee table that Lisa had brought home from work. It was a normal middle-class home, and suddenly it felt very small with these people in it. Eleanor sat on the couch, declining Robert's offer to check the room first. She looked around with interest, her eyes lingering on the family photos. "You have a lovely home." "Thank you," Lisa said automatically. "Can I get you some coffee or tea or—" "Coffee would be wonderful if it's not too much trouble." Lisa disappeared into the kitchen, probably grateful for something to do. Daniel sat in the armchair across from Eleanor, his mind still trying to process what was happening. Robert stood near the door, his hands clasped in front of him, alert but not threatening. "I owe you an explanation," Eleanor said, "and an apology for the deception yesterday." "You didn't deceive anyone," Daniel said slowly. "You needed help, I helped. That's all? It's not quite that simple." Eleanor folded her hands in her lap. "My full name is Eleanor Ashworth. My late husband was William Ashworth, who founded Ashworth Industries. Perhaps you've heard of it." Daniel had. Everyone had. Ashworth Industries was one of the largest manufacturing conglomerates in the state. They made everything from industrial equipment to automotive parts. They employed thousands of people. The Ashworth name was on buildings, scholarships, hospital wings. "You're that Mrs. Ashworth." Daniel felt dizzy. "I am. Yesterday was the anniversary of my husband's death. 25 years. I do the same thing every year on that day. I take out William's motorcycle, the one he restored himself, and I ride it. Just to feel close to him, you understand. It's a silly ritual, but it matters to me." Lisa returned with coffee, handing a cup to Eleanor and one to Daniel. She sat down next to her husband, her hand finding his. "The motorcycle broke down," Eleanor continued, "and I needed to get to the hospital because my daughter, my only child, was having emergency surgery. When your boss turned me away, I thought I would have to abandon the bike and find another way. But then you helped me." She paused, her eyes getting a little wet. "Because of you, I made it to the hospital in time. I was there when Rachel woke up from surgery. I was able to hold her hand and tell her everything was going to be okay. How is your daughter?" Lisa asked softly. "She's recovering well, thank you. She'll be in the hospital for a few more days, but the doctors say she's out of danger." Eleanor sipped her coffee. "After I left the hospital last night, I couldn't stop thinking about you, Mr. Cooper. About your kindness. So I asked Robert to find out who you were." Robert spoke up from his position by the door. "It wasn't difficult. We went back to the garage and asked around. The other mechanics there were very forthcoming. They told us what happened," Eleanor said, her expression darkening. "They told us you were fired for helping me. They told us about your boss and his priorities." Daniel felt heat rising in his face. "They had no right to share my personal business with strangers." "Don't be angry with them," Eleanor said gently. "They were quite upset on your behalf. The young one, Tony, I believe his name was particularly vocal about the injustice of it. He said you were the best mechanic they had and the only one who actually cared about the customers." "That doesn't change anything," Daniel said. "I'm still out of a job." "Yes, about that." Eleanor set down her coffee cup and reached into a slim leather bag she'd been carrying. "I spent much of last night looking into you, Mr. Cooper. I hope you'll forgive the intrusion. But when someone shows me genuine kindness with no expectation of reward, I want to know who they are." She pulled out a folder and opened it. Daniel caught glimpses of documents inside. What looked like his employment history, maybe even his resume from 8 years ago when he'd applied at Premier. "You've been a mechanic for 22 years," Eleanor continued. "You have a spotless record. No complaints, numerous commendations. You're ASE certified in 8 different areas. Customers consistently praise your honesty and skill. You've never been late, never called in sick without legitimate reason, never overcharged or recommended unnecessary work. She looked up at him. You're exactly the kind of person I look for. Look for? Daniel repeated. I own things, Mr. Cooper, many things. My late husband built an empire, and I've spent the last 25 years maintaining and expanding it. One of our holdings is Ashworth Automotive Group. We own a chain of high-end service centers across 3 states. Luxury vehicles primarily, but we also handle vintage restorations and specialty work. Daniel felt Lisa's hand tighten in his. I'm offering you a position, Eleanor said simply. Director of operations for our flagship location here in the city. You would oversee a team of 12 mechanics, manage the service department, and work with customers. The salary is $95,000 a year, plus benefits, profit sharing, and a company vehicle. The number hit Daniel like a physical blow. $95,000. He'd been making $42,000 at Premier. This was more than double. This was life-changing money. I don't understand, he said. Why would you offer me this? You don't know me. Yesterday was everything I needed to know, Eleanor interrupted. Character, Mr. Cooper, that's what I saw yesterday. You helped someone in need expecting nothing in return, even knowing it might cost you. That kind of integrity can't be taught. Either you have it or you don't, and you have it. Mrs. Ashworth, I'm just a mechanic. I don't know anything about managing a department, or you'll learn. We'll train you, but I can't train someone to care about people. I can't train someone to do the right thing when no one's watching. Those qualities are rare and they're valuable. She pulled an envelope from the folder. This is a formal offer letter. Take the day to think about it. Discuss it with your wife, but I hope you'll accept. She stood, and Robert moved to open the door. Daniel and Lisa stood too, both of them still in shock. There's one more thing, Eleanor said at the door. She pulled another envelope from her bag. This one smaller. This is for the work you did yesterday. I know you refused payment, but please accept this as a thank you. Not for the mechanical work, but for the kindness. She pressed the envelope into Daniel's hand before he could protest, then walked out to the waiting SUVs. Robert nodded politely to them both and followed. Daniel and Lisa stood on their porch, watching the 7 black SUVs pull away in formation, disappearing down the quiet suburban street as the morning sun climbed higher in the sky. Did that just happen? Lisa whispered. Daniel looked down at the 2 envelopes in his hands. He opened the smaller one first. Inside was a check. His eyes widened as he counted the zeros. $50,000. Oh my God, Lisa breathed, looking over his shoulder. Daniel, oh my God. He opened the other envelope with shaking hands. The offer letter was official, printed on expensive letter stock with the Ashworth Industries letterhead. Everything Eleanor had said was there in writing. Salary, benefits, start date. They wanted him to begin in 2 weeks. Daniel sat down heavily on the porch steps. Lisa sat beside him, her head on his shoulder. You did the right thing yesterday, she said quietly. And the universe noticed. Daniel didn't know what to say. 24 hours ago, he'd been fired and facing financial ruin. Now he was holding a check that would solve their immediate problems and a job offer that would change their lives. All because he'd taken 15 minutes to help someone who needed it. I have to call Tommy, he said finally. He's going to think I'm making this up. Lisa laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. I'm here watching it happen, and I think you're making it up. They sat there on the porch as the neighborhood came fully awake around them, holding each other, holding the envelopes that represented a completely unexpected second chance, and trying to believe that sometimes, just sometimes, kindness really did come back around. 2 weeks had never felt so long and so short at the same time. Daniel spent those days in a strange state of disbelief, constantly checking the offer letter to make sure it was real, that he hadn't imagined the whole thing. Lisa had insisted they deposit the $50,000 check immediately, half expecting it to bounce. It didn't. The money was real. All of it was real. The first week, Daniel had called Eleanor's office 3 times just to confirm they really wanted him to start, that there hadn't been some mistake. Each time her assistant, a patient woman named Claire, assured him that yes, Mrs. Ashworth was expecting him on Monday at 8 in the morning, and yes, everything was arranged. He'd driven past the Ashworth Automotive flagship location twice just to see it. The building was impressive, Modern glass and steel architecture, spotlessly clean, with a parking lot full of Mercedes, BMWs, Porsches, even a few Ferraris. It made Premier Auto Services look like a shack. The thought of managing a place like this terrified and excited him in equal measure. Tommy had actually cried when they told him the news. Cried and hugged Daniel so hard he could barely breathe. "Dad, I'm so proud of you," his son had said. "You did something good and good things came back to you. That's how it's supposed to work. If only the world worked that way more often," Daniel thought. Now it was Monday morning, his first day, and Daniel stood in front of his closet trying to figure out what to wear. The offer letter had said business casual, but he didn't own much that qualified. He'd spent his entire adult life in work uniforms and jeans. Lisa had taken him shopping over the weekend, insisting he needed at least a few nice shirts and decent pants. He'd protested at the expense, but she'd reminded him about the $50,000 and told him to stop being stubborn. He settled on dark blue pants and a light gray button-down shirt. Looking at himself in the mirror, he barely recognized the man staring back. He looked professional, legitimate, like someone who managed things. "You look handsome," Lisa said from the doorway. She was already dressed for her shift at the library, holding a travel mug of coffee. "Nervous?" "Terrified," Daniel admitted. "You're going to be great. Eleanor Ashworth doesn't strike me as someone who makes mistakes about people." "I'm just a mechanic, Lisa. What do I know about running a whole department?" She walked over and straightened his collar, even though it didn't need straightening. "You know cars. You know how to treat people right. You know how to work hard. That's more than most managers know." She kissed him on the cheek. "Now go show them what you've got." The drive to Ashworth Automotive took 20 minutes through morning traffic. Daniel arrived 15 minutes early, because showing up late on your first day seemed like a terrible way to start. He parked his old truck in the employee lot, suddenly very aware of how beat up it looked next to all the luxury vehicles around him. The lobby was stunning. Polished marble floors, modern furniture, and a reception desk that looked like it belonged in a five-star hotel. A young woman behind the desk looked up and smiled as he entered. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I'm Daniel Cooper. It's my first day. I'm supposed to—" "Oh, Mr. Cooper." "Yes, we've been expecting you. Let me call Claire." She picked up a phone and spoke quietly into it. Within 2 minutes, Claire appeared. She was in her 50s with kind eyes and an efficient manner. "Daniel, welcome. Mrs. Ashworth wanted to be here this morning, but her daughter needed her at the hospital for some follow-up tests. She sends her apologies and says she'll be by later this week." She gestured for him to follow. "Let me show you around." The tour was overwhelming. The service bays were immaculate, equipped with the latest diagnostic equipment and tools. Everything was organized, labeled, clean. There was a customer lounge with leather couches, complimentary coffee and snacks, and a big screen TV. The parts department was 3 times the size of Premier's entire shop. And the staff, everyone looked professional, focused, competent. Claire introduced him to what felt like 50 people. Service writers, mechanics, detailers, the parts manager, the customer service supervisor. Daniel tried to remember names, but knew he'd probably forget half of them by lunch. Finally, she led him to an office. His office. It had a window overlooking the service floor, a real desk, a computer, filing cabinets. His name was already on a placard outside the door. "Daniel Cooper, Director of Operations." "This is yours," Claire said. "Computer password is on that sticky note. Your email is already set up. Mrs. Ashworth left some materials for you to review. Operational procedures, staff files, that sort of thing. Take the morning to get oriented. At 1 o'clock, you have a department meeting with the service team. Any questions?" About 1,000,000, Daniel thought. "I'll figure it out." "Thank you." She smiled and left him alone in his office. His office. Daniel sat in the leather chair behind the desk and just stared at the space for a minute. 3 days ago, he'd been cleaning out a locker at a garage that fired him. Now he had an office with his name on it. He spent the morning reading through the materials Eleanor had left. The operation was impressive. Detailed records on every vehicle serviced, customer satisfaction scores, employee performance reviews. Everything was documented, organized, professional. The service team had 12 mechanics, all of them certified and experienced. Their work was consistently high quality, but Daniel noticed something interesting in the customer feedback forms. The compliments were all about technical skill. Fixed the problem quickly. Diagnosed the issue accurately. very knowledgeable. But there wasn't much about personal connection. No comments like the ones Daniel used to get at Premiere. Daniel took time to explain everything. He really cared about helping me. Felt like he was working on his own car. Maybe that's what Eleanor had meant about character and integrity. Technical skill was important, but it wasn't everything. At 1 o'clock, Daniel walked down to the conference room for his first team meeting. 12 mechanics were already there, sitting around a long table. They all looked up as he entered, their expressions ranging from curious to skeptical. Daniel recognized that look. New boss, first day, everyone sizing him up, wondering if he'd be easy to work with or a pain in the neck. Afternoon, everyone, Daniel said, trying to sound confident. I'm Daniel Cooper. I know you're probably wondering who I am and why I'm here, so let me just be straight with you. 3 weeks ago, I was working at Premier Auto Services. 2 weeks ago, I got fired for helping a customer my boss didn't want to deal with. Last week, Mrs. Ashworth offered me this position, and I'm still not entirely sure why, but here I am. A few of them smiled at that. Honesty was apparently unexpected. I've been a mechanic for 22 years, Daniel continued. I love this work. I love solving problems and fixing things and helping people keep their vehicles running. I'm not here to boss you around or change everything. I'm here to learn from you and hopefully make this place even better than it already is. One of the older mechanics, a guy with gray in his beard, spoke up. You really got fired for helping a customer? Yeah. She needed her motorcycle fixed to get to the hospital. My boss said no. I said yes during my lunch break. He fired me. That's pretty stupid of him, another mechanic said. Several others nodded in agreement. Maybe, Daniel said, but it led me here, so I can't complain too much. Now I know you guys are the experts on how things work here. I'm going to need your help learning the systems, understanding the customers, figuring out where we can improve. I'm not going to pretend I know everything just because I have a title. Questions? A younger mechanic raised his hand. Are you going to be one of those managers who just sits in an office, or are you going to actually work on cars? Honestly, I don't know yet. I imagine there's a lot of administrative stuff I need to handle. But I can't imagine not getting my hands dirty at least sometimes. Old habits, you know. Daniel smiled. Why, you need help with something? We've got a vintage Porsche out there that's been giving us fits. Electrical gremlins. Been chasing the problem for 2 days. I'll take a look after this meeting. Can't promise I'll solve it, but I can try. That got him some approving nods. For the next 45 minutes, they discussed current projects, upcoming appointments, some supply issues with a parts vendor. Daniel mostly listened, taking notes, asking questions when things weren't clear. By the end, he felt like he'd learned more about the operation than all morning of reading files. After the meeting, true to his word, Daniel followed the young mechanic, his name was Kevin, out to the bay where the Porsche sat. It was a beautiful 1987 911, cherry red, obviously someone's pride and joy. Kevin explained the problem. Intermittent power loss, no clear pattern, nothing showing up on diagnostics. Daniel grabbed a multimeter and started tracing circuits. 20 minutes later, he found it. A corroded ground connection hidden behind the dashboard, so subtle you'd miss it unless you were looking in.